Hello, Robonauts, and welcome to this month's edition of Coding for Success, where we'd like to spend just a few minutes talking to you about how to plan for your next automation project. We'll talk about both new bots, as well as converting from Gen 1 bots to Robocorp's Gen 2 solution. For new bots, there are several things to consider. If you already have a current written procedure or some kind of document that outlines exactly what an individual is supposed to do, where they're supposed to make decisions, where data comes from and where it goes, that's an excellent starting point for your automation. Another thing to consider is also when and how it will be scheduled. Is this something where you need human input, and maybe this should be an attended bot? Is this something where you want it to kick off every Wednesday, or do you want it to be triggered by an email? And something else to consider is also your infrastructure. Is this something you want to run on Robocorp's SaaS solution, where you can spin up as many number of bots as you need in order to complete an SLA? Is this something where you have a desktop application that is something that only lives inside of your environment for whatever reason? Maybe it's an old application. The other thing to consider with infrastructure is also the cost. Is it going to be cheaper to run it in Robocorp's SaaS solution? Or is it going to be better to run your own servers and incur your own infrastructure costs? The other thing to consider for new bots is also how you code them and the quality of code that you're producing. So some things to consider with the coding steps themselves are, will this code need to be reused? So is this a function that's going to be common to a lot of things that do? For example, if you're doing an SAP application, you're always going to need to log in. So creating a reusable library or creating a reusable component where you can import those into all of your SaaS bots going forward would be a much better use of time than creating a monolithic repository and having that being one or several lines of code that you're going to have to copy and paste into all of your future bots. So understanding how this bot plays into your larger automation practice and into your larger automation journey and projects will really be beneficial to getting it right the first time and saving a lot of technical debt in the future to redo this or to improve or change this. And finally, it's always good to keep in mind as you go good coding practices, making sure that you don't, save 5 or 10 minutes now to incur 2 or 3 hours of changes and optimizations as you go forward. For bot conversions, it's always important to consider the very first question of, do we still need this bot? Is this something you're converting because it just happens to be there? Or is this something people are still using and running? If this is something that went from being run every single day, 24/7, 365, to now being run once or twice a year, is that something that needs to be converted immediately? Or is that something that needs to be converted at all? If you do need to convert that, do you still need it to be in the same form that you originally had it in? Is it possible that with new technology, that with some of the changes in infrastructure or other things in the company, that you maybe need to change not only how the bot works, but maybe why the bot's working? Something else to consider is that when you do make the conversion, are there other things that you can improve? So similar to, does the bot need to keep the same form? Are there other things that you can change and improve about the bot while you're making these changes, whether it's an optimization, whether it's a performance improvement, or whether it's maybe a different system that you now have access to that would be a better first touch for the bot as opposed to the prior first touch for the bot? And finally, something that tends to get lost in the weeds with a lot of these, not only automation projects, but IT projects in general, is the general documentation. For future developers and future maintainers specifically, one of the questions they're always going to ask you is, why are we doing this? And what are we doing this for? And those two questions, if you can document and keep with your repository, that is a really helpful thing for future maintainers to understand what and why they're doing that. If you can keep inline comments and keep clean code, and I know that term's generally thrown around, so I won't get into what that means for you, but if you can do some of the things inside of your organization and practice that help future maintainers, will also be worth the time to do now. We also have a Conversion Accelerator, and this is both inside of our Automation Studio tool as well as in our VS Code tool. And so what this tool can do for you is not only give you a leg up and help you to convert a little bit faster, but if you run multiple of your bots through this at the same time, it can also show you and highlight the parallels. So if you have very similar loop structures, or you have very similar keywords that are doing the exact same function across multiple bots, it can help to highlight that for you so that when you go to convert, you can start with a library, start with common keywords, and get the most bang for your buck on the first conversion, as opposed to getting 4 or 5 bot conversions in, only to realize you've used the same keywords to go back and potentially create a library, or to potentially create a resource file where you then bring all of those keywords out of your original bots and into this resource file. And as always, the same coding practices are useful for both new as well as bot conversions. Well, Robonauts, that's it for this month's edition. We hope you have a great time, and good luck automating the boring stuff.
Robocorp, where the world comes together to automate.